The morning sun cast long shadows across the Navy training facility in Coronado, California. Sarah Martinez adjusted her tactical gear one final time before stepping into what would become one of the most memorable days of her career. At 32, she had spent the last 8 years working her way up through the ranks of Navy Special Operations Evaluation, but today felt different. Today, she was tasked with observing a particularly challenging group of SEAL candidates during their advanced combat training exercise. The briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as 24 elite candidates gathered for their final assessment. These weren't fresh recruits. They were experienced military personnel from various branches, each believing they had what it took to join the most elite fighting force in the world. Sarah entered quietly, dressed in standard training fatigues with her hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Her instructor badge was small and understated, easily missed by those not paying close attention. Commander Thompson, the lead training instructor, began his introduction without acknowledging Sarah's presence beyond a subtle nod. This was intentional. The candidates needed to believe this was just another training day, not a formal evaluation that could make or break their careers. Sarah took her position near the back of the room, clipboard in hand, observing the body language and attitudes of the men before her. "Today's exercise will test everything you've learned," Commander Thompson announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen real combat. "You'll be working in teams of 4. The scenario is a hostage rescue in an urban environment. You have limited ammunition, no backup, and civilians in the area. Your mission is to extract 3 high-value targets while neutralizing hostile forces." The candidates exchanged glances, some confident, others showing the first signs of nervousness. Sarah made her first notes, documenting who seemed to naturally take charge and who appeared to be followers. Leadership under pressure was one of the key traits she was evaluating. As the teams formed, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. Team Alpha, led by a cocky former Marine named Jake Mitchell, was eyeing her with obvious skepticism. Mitchell had been vocal about his opinions regarding women in combat roles during previous training sessions, though he'd been careful to keep his comments just within regulation boundaries. "Looks like we got ourselves an observer today," Mitchell muttered to his teammates, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Hope she can keep up when things get real." His teammates chuckled, and Sarah felt the familiar surge of determination she'd experienced countless times before. She'd faced this attitude throughout her military career, but it never got easier. What these candidates didn't know was that Sarah had completed the same training they were currently struggling through. She'd earned her place not through special consideration, but by outperforming 90% of her male counterparts. The training facility had been designed to replicate real-world combat scenarios. Multiple buildings, narrow alleyways, and simulated civilian areas created a complex environment that would challenge even the most experienced operators. Sarah followed the teams as they moved to their starting positions, her trained eye cataloging their movements, communication patterns, and tactical decisions. Team Alpha moved with the kind of swagger that came from individual confidence, but lacked the seamless coordination of truly elite units. Mitchell had positioned himself as point man, clearly wanting to be the hero of the exercise. His teammates, Rodriguez, Chen, and Brooks, seemed willing to let him take the lead, but Sarah could see the cracks in their formation already. The exercise began with the sharp crack of simulated gunfire. Team Alpha breached their assigned building with textbook precision, but Sarah noticed Mitchell's tendency to rush ahead without properly clearing corners. It was a rookie mistake that could get real people killed in actual combat situations. As the teams progressed through the scenario, Sarah moved through the facility using routes known only to evaluators. She could observe from multiple angles, getting a complete picture of each team's performance. What she saw from Team Alpha concerned her. Mitchell's need to be the star was putting his team at risk, and his teammates were either too intimidated or too inexperienced to challenge his decisions. The turning point came when Team Alpha encountered their first group of simulated hostages. According to the scenario, these were terrified civilians caught in a terrorist takeover. The proper protocol was to secure the area, verify the identity of each person, and then move them to safety in an orderly fashion. Instead, Mitchell ordered his team to rush the rescue, eager to score points for speed. Sarah watched as the team's lack of patience created exactly the kind of chaos that led to friendly fire incidents in real combat. Rodriguez nearly shot Chen when communication broke down, and Brooks lost track of his assigned sector while trying to follow Mitchell's rapidly changing orders. From her concealed position, Sarah activated her radio. "Command, this is Evaluator 7. Team Alpha is showing concerning leadership and communication issues. Recommend immediate intervention if situation deteriorates further." The response crackled back immediately. "Evaluator 7, continue observation. Teams are unaware this is formal evaluation. Do not reveal your position unless absolutely necessary for safety." Sarah understood the directive, but watching Mitchell's reckless leadership style was testing her patience. The man clearly had individual skills. His marksmanship was excellent and his physical conditioning was outstanding, but SEAL operations required something more important than individual heroics. They required trust, communication, and the ability to follow orders even when your ego wanted you to lead. As the exercise continued, other teams began to distinguish themselves. Team Bravo, led by a quiet Navy petty officer named Williams, moved with the kind of methodical precision that Sarah knew from experience would keep people alive in real combat. Team Charlie had stumbled early, but recovered well, showing adaptability under pressure. Team Delta was solid but unspectacular, exactly the kind of steady performance that made good operators. But Team Alpha continued to struggle with Mitchell's leadership style. When they encountered a simulated IED, Mitchell's first instinct was to charge forward and disarm it himself, rather than following proper explosive ordnance disposal protocols. His teammates voiced their concerns, but Mitchell dismissed them with the kind of arrogance that had no place in special operations. Sarah found herself in an increasingly difficult position. Her job was to evaluate, not to interfere, but Mitchell's behavior was creating a dangerous pattern that could carry over into real operations if not addressed. She made detailed notes about each incident, building a comprehensive picture of Team Alpha's dysfunction. The midpoint of the exercise arrived with teams rotating through different scenarios. Sarah used this break to review her observations with the other evaluators via secure radio. The consensus was clear. While several teams were performing at or above expectations, Team Alpha's leadership issues were becoming a serious concern. As the candidates prepared for the second half of the exercise, Sarah noticed Mitchell approaching her position. She remained in her observer role, but his body language suggested confrontation was coming. "Ma'am," Mitchell said, his tone respectful but carrying an undercurrent of challenge. "I couldn't help but notice you've been taking a lot of notes about my team. Mind if I ask what specific areas we need to improve?" Sarah looked up from her clipboard, meeting his gaze steadily. This was exactly the kind of moment her training had prepared her for, a candidate attempting to gain information that could compromise the evaluation process. Her response would set the tone for everything that followed. "I'm here to observe the exercise, Candidate Mitchell. Your focus should be on completing your mission objectives, not on what I'm writing down." Mitchell's jaw tightened slightly. "With respect, ma'am, my team has been executing at a high level. If there are specific deficiencies you're noting, it would help us improve our performance." Sarah recognized the tactic. Mitchell was fishing for information while trying to establish himself as the kind of leader who advocated for his team. But she also saw through to the real motivation. His ego couldn't handle the possibility that someone, especially a woman, might be finding fault with his leadership. "Your team's performance will be evaluated based on mission completion and adherence to protocols," Sarah replied evenly. "I suggest you focus on the exercise rather than the evaluation process." For a moment, Mitchell looked like he might push the issue further, but the call to resume positions ended the conversation. As he walked away, Sarah saw him talking animatedly with his teammates, and she suspected he was sharing his frustrations about being observed by someone he considered unqualified to judge elite operators. The second half of the exercise would prove to be even more revealing than the first. The afternoon phase of the training exercise introduced a complication that none of the candidates had expected. Commander Thompson's voice crackled over the radio system, informing all teams that the scenario had evolved. Intelligence reports indicated additional hostile forces in the area, and the extraction timeline had been moved up by 30 minutes. This was the kind of real-world pressure that separated genuine special operations material from those who simply looked good on paper. Sarah positioned herself at an elevated observation point that gave her a clear view of multiple team positions. The added pressure was immediately visible in how each team responded to the changing conditions. Team Bravo adapted smoothly, with Williams quickly redistributing assignments and adjusting their approach. Team Charlie showed some initial confusion but recovered within minutes. Team Delta maintained their steady pace but increased their communication frequency to stay coordinated. Team Alpha's response was exactly what Sarah had feared. Instead of taking a moment to reassess and plan, Mitchell immediately began issuing rapid-fire orders that contradicted their previous strategy. Rodriguez attempted to suggest they pause for 30 seconds to reorganize, but Mitchell cut him off with visible frustration. "We don't have time for committee decisions," Mitchell snapped into his radio, not caring that his transmission was being monitored by the evaluation team. "I need everyone to trust my judgment and execute without hesitation." Sarah made a note about leadership under pressure, but her attention was drawn to something more concerning. Through her binoculars, she could see that Team Alpha was approaching a section of the training facility that contained a legitimate safety hazard. A piece of equipment had malfunctioned earlier in the day, creating an unstable platform that could collapse under weight. The area had been marked as off-limits, but the markings were subtle and designed to test whether candidates would notice and respond to environmental dangers. As Team Alpha moved closer to the hazardous area, Sarah realized that Mitchell's tunnel vision was preventing him from seeing the warning markers. His focus was entirely on reaching the next objective as quickly as possible, and his teammates were following his lead without questioning the route. Sarah activated her radio on the emergency frequency. "Command, this is Evaluator 7. Team Alpha is approaching grid section Charlie 4, which contains the equipment failure from this morning. They appear unaware of the hazard." The response was immediate. "Evaluator 7, you are authorized to intervene if team safety is at risk. Use your judgment." Sarah found herself facing a decision that would reveal her true role to the candidates, but safety had to take priority. She keyed her radio to the frequency all candidates were monitoring. "All teams, this is safety control. Team Alpha, halt your advance immediately. You are approaching a marked hazard area. Check your route markers and select an alternative path." The radio crackled with acknowledgments from the other teams, but Team Alpha's response was telling. Instead of immediately stopping and checking for hazard markers, Mitchell's voice came back with obvious irritation. "Safety control. Team Alpha has visual on the objective. We can navigate any obstacles in our path. Request permission to continue on current route." Sarah felt a flash of anger at Mitchell's dismissive attitude toward safety protocols, but she kept her voice professional. "Team Alpha, this is not optional. The area you are approaching contains damaged equipment that poses a fall risk. You will select an alternative route immediately." This time, Mitchell's teammates could be heard in the background of his transmission, clearly urging him to follow the safety directive. But Mitchell's response showed exactly why he was failing the evaluation, even though he didn't know he was being formally assessed. "Copy. Safety control. Team Alpha is backing off. But I want to note for the record that we could have handled whatever obstacles were present." Sarah shook her head as she watched Team Alpha reluctantly change course. Mitchell's need to argue with legitimate safety concerns showed a dangerous disregard for the kind of protocols that kept operators alive in real combat situations. Even more concerning was his willingness to risk his teammates' safety to prove a point about his own capabilities. As the exercise continued, the gap between Team Alpha and the other teams became increasingly apparent. The added time pressure and route change had thrown Mitchell off his planned approach, and his inability to adapt smoothly was creating cascading problems for his entire team. Team Bravo reached their extraction point 15 minutes ahead of schedule, having successfully rescued all 3 simulated hostages while neutralizing threats efficiently. Team Charlie had a minor setback when they encountered unexpected resistance, but they adapted their tactics and completed the mission only 5 minutes behind schedule. Team Delta maintained their steady performance and finished exactly on time. Team Alpha, meanwhile, was struggling with the new timeline. Mitchell's frustration with the route change had led him to take unnecessary risks in an attempt to make up lost time. When they finally reached their assigned hostage location, his rushed approach led to a critical error that would have resulted in civilian casualties in a real operation. Sarah watched through her scope as Mitchell ordered his team to breach a door without properly clearing the room beyond. In the scenario, this room contained both hostages and captors in close proximity, requiring careful coordination and precise execution. Mitchell's impatience led him to use a flashbang grenade in a situation where it would have injured the very people they were trying to rescue. The exercise controllers immediately called a halt to Team Alpha's scenario, citing multiple safety and procedural violations. As the simulated smoke cleared, Sarah could see Mitchell arguing with the controllers, clearly believing he was being held to unfair standards. With the formal exercise concluded, Sarah began the process of compiling her detailed evaluation report. Her observations painted a clear picture of each team's strengths and weaknesses, but Team Alpha's performance raised serious questions about Mitchell's suitability for special operations work. As candidates gathered in the debriefing area, Sarah noticed Mitchell continuing to voice his frustrations to anyone who would listen. He seemed convinced that the safety intervention and subsequent mission failure were the result of overly cautious oversight rather than legitimate concerns about his team's performance. "I don't know who that safety control person thinks they are," Mitchell said to Rodriguez, loud enough for others to hear. "We've been through combat situations that were 10 times more dangerous than anything in this training facility. Someone sitting in an air-conditioned observation post doesn't have the experience to make judgment calls about what we can handle." Sarah felt her jaw tighten as she heard Mitchell's assessment of her intervention. His assumption that safety oversight came from inexperienced personnel showed exactly the kind of arrogance that got people killed in real operations. But what bothered her more was his complete inability to recognize that his own poor decisions had created the dangerous situations in the first place. The debriefing session was conducted by Commander Thompson, who reviewed each team's performance without revealing that formal evaluations had been taking place. Sarah remained in her observer role, taking notes on how candidates responded to feedback and criticism. When Thompson addressed Team Alpha's performance, his critique was professional but pointed. "Your team showed individual technical skills, but coordination and communication broke down under pressure. The safety intervention was necessary because environmental awareness was compromised. These are areas that need significant improvement before you're ready for operational deployment." Mitchell's response was telling. Instead of accepting the feedback and asking for specific guidance on improvement, he immediately began defending his decisions and questioning the validity of the criticism. "Sir, with respect, my team was executing efficiently under the time constraints. The safety intervention interrupted our momentum at a critical moment. In a real operation, we wouldn't have the luxury of stopping for every potential hazard." Thompson's expression remained neutral, but Sarah could see his disapproval of Mitchell's attitude. "Candidate Mitchell, in real operations, The luxury you wouldn't have is the ability to risk your team's lives for no tactical advantage. Environmental awareness and safety protocols exist because operators who ignore them don't survive long enough to become effective. The exchange continued for several more minutes, with Mitchell growing increasingly defensive and his teammates becoming visibly uncomfortable with his confrontational approach to receiving feedback. Sarah documented every aspect of the interaction, knowing that adaptability and response to criticism were crucial factors in determining who was ready for the extreme demands of SEAL operations. As the debriefing concluded, candidates were dismissed to clean their equipment and prepare for evening chow. Sarah remained behind to coordinate with the other evaluators and begin preliminary discussions about each candidate's performance. The conversation among the evaluation team was extensive, but the consensus about Team Alpha was unanimous. While Rodriguez, Chen, and Brooks showed potential and could benefit from additional leadership training, Mitchell's performance raised serious red flags about his suitability for special operations work. "His technical skills are solid," noted Lieutenant Commander Hayes, one of the senior evaluators. "But his inability to accept feedback and his disregard for safety protocols are major concerns. Add in the leadership issues we observed, and I'm not seeing someone ready for the responsibility that comes with a SEAL designation." Sarah nodded, reviewing her notes one final time. "He showed consistent patterns of prioritizing individual recognition over team safety and mission success. That's not something you can train out of someone easily." As the evaluation team continued their discussions, Sarah couldn't help but think about Mitchell's earlier comments regarding her qualifications to assess his performance. Tomorrow's final phase of training would give her an opportunity to show exactly what kind of experience she brought to the evaluation process. But for now, her focus remained on ensuring that only candidates with the right combination of skills, attitude, and judgment would advance to the next level of SEAL training. The evening passed quietly, with candidates resting and preparing for what they believed would be their final day of assessment. None of them knew that their most challenging test was still to come, and that the quiet observer they had dismissed would soon reveal just how much she understood about the demands of special operations work. The final morning of assessment arrived with an unexpected announcement that changed everything the candidates thought they knew about their evaluation. Commander Thompson gathered all remaining personnel in the main briefing room, his expression more serious than usual. Sarah entered with the other evaluation staff, but this time she wasn't carrying a clipboard or wearing the understated gear of an observer. Instead, she wore the distinctive uniform of a SEAL instructor, complete with the special operations patches that indicated extensive combat experience and advanced training certifications. Her hair was still regulation, but her entire bearing had shifted from quiet observer to seasoned operator. The transformation was immediately noticeable to anyone who understood military hierarchy and qualification indicators. "Before we begin today's final exercise," Commander Thompson announced, "I need to make something clear about the evaluation process you've been participating in. What you believe to be standard training has actually been a formal assessment conducted by qualified SEAL evaluators. These evaluators have been observing and documenting your performance throughout the entire process." A ripple of surprise moved through the candidates as they began to understand that their careers had been on the line during exercises they thought were just training. Sarah watched their faces carefully. Noting who seemed concerned about their performance versus who appeared confident in how they had conducted themselves, Thompson continued his briefing. "Today's exercise will be different from anything you've experienced so far. You'll be working alongside active SEAL operators in a scenario designed to test your ability to integrate with an established team under extreme conditions. Your performance will be evaluated not just on individual skills, but on how well you can support and be supported by operators with extensive combat experience." As Thompson spoke, Sarah stepped forward to address the group directly. The change in the room's atmosphere was immediate and dramatic. Several candidates, including Mitchell, straightened unconsciously as they realized that the woman they had dismissed as an inexperienced observer was actually a qualified SEAL instructor. "I'm Chief Petty Officer Martinez," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the quiet authority that came from years of leadership in high-stakes situations. "For the past 2 days, I've been evaluating your performance as teams and as individuals. Today, you'll have the opportunity to demonstrate whether you can operate effectively alongside experienced special operations personnel." The revelation hit Mitchell like a physical blow. Sarah could see the exact moment when he realized that every dismissive comment, every questioning of her qualifications, every assumption about her lack of experience had been documented by someone who actually outranked him and possessed qualifications he was still trying to earn. Rodriguez, Chen, and Brooks exchanged glances that showed they were quickly reconsidering their teammates' behavior over the previous days. They had followed Mitchell's lead in questioning Sarah's presence, but now they understood they had been disrespecting a superior officer with actual combat experience. Sarah continued her briefing, outlining the day's scenario. "You'll be divided into mixed teams consisting of 2 candidates and 2 active operators. The mission is a high-value target capture in a complex urban environment with multiple unknown variables. Your ability to follow orders, adapt to changing conditions, and integrate with your temporary teammates will determine whether you advance to the next phase of SEAL training." As team assignments were announced, Sarah noted that Mitchell was assigned to her team along with Williams from Team Bravo. The pairing was intentional. It would give her a direct opportunity to assess whether Mitchell could adjust his attitude and work effectively with someone whose authority he had previously questioned. The other 2 team members were introduced as Petty Officer First Class Garcia and Chief Petty Officer Johnson, both SEAL veterans with multiple combat deployments. Their presence immediately changed the dynamic, as the candidates found themselves working alongside operators whose experience and qualifications were unquestionable. As the teams prepared for the mission briefing, Sarah observed Mitchell's behavior carefully. She was looking for signs that he could recognize his mistakes and adjust his approach accordingly. What she saw was not encouraging. Instead of showing humility or attempting to learn from his errors, Mitchell seemed focused on proving that his previous performance had been misunderstood rather than genuinely flawed. "Chief Martinez," Mitchell said as they checked their equipment, his tone carefully respectful but lacking genuine acknowledgement of his previous attitude. "I want you to know that my team was executing at a high level during the previous exercises. If there were issues with how we interacted with the evaluation process, that was just because we were focused on mission completion." Sarah paused in her equipment check to look at Mitchell directly. His attempt to reframe his behavior as mission focus rather than poor judgment told her everything she needed to know about his capacity for self-reflection and growth. "Candidate Mitchell," she replied evenly, "your focus over the next several hours should be on demonstrating that you can operate effectively as part of this team. Your previous performance has been thoroughly documented and will be considered in your final evaluation." The mission briefing revealed a complex scenario that would test every aspect of special operations skills. The target was a simulated high-value individual being held in a compound with multiple buildings, unknown numbers of hostile forces, and civilian presence in the surrounding area. Intelligence was limited and potentially outdated, requiring teams to adapt their approach based on real-time observations. As the teams moved into position, Sarah found herself working directly with Mitchell for the first time. His technical skills were immediately apparent. His movement was smooth, his weapon handling was professional, and his physical conditioning was excellent. But within minutes, the same leadership and attitude issues that had plagued his performance throughout the assessment began to surface. When Garcia suggested a route modification based on his observation of the target area, Mitchell's first instinct was to argue rather than consider the input. "I think the direct approach is still our best option," he said, clearly wanting to maintain some control over the team's tactical decisions. Sarah intervened immediately. Garcia's assessment is based on multiple combat deployments in similar environments. We're using his recommended route. Her tone left no room for argument, and Mitchell was forced to follow rather than lead. As the team advanced through the compound, Sarah was able to observe Mitchell's performance under the direct supervision of experienced operators. What she saw confirmed her evaluation concerns. While he could follow orders when directly supervised, he consistently looked for opportunities to assert his own ideas rather than fully embracing his role as a trainee working with mentors. The situation came to a head when the team encountered an unexpected obstacle. A group of simulated civilians who appeared to be under duress but might also be serving as human shields for hostile forces. The scenario required careful assessment and precise execution to avoid civilian casualties while neutralizing legitimate threats. Johnson immediately began coordinating a careful approach that would allow the team to assess the situation without committing to a course of action prematurely. This was exactly the kind of methodical, safety-first approach that Sarah had found lacking in Mitchell's previous leadership attempts. But Mitchell, despite being in a trainee role, began pressing for a more aggressive approach. "We're losing momentum," he said over the team radio. "If we can get positive identification on the hostiles, we should engage immediately, rather than giving them time to relocate or harm the civilians." Sarah realized this was a defining moment for Mitchell's evaluation. His response to working under experienced leadership would determine whether he had the flexibility and judgment necessary for special operations work. She keyed her radio to address the situation directly. "All team members maintain current positions. We proceed with the established plan. No modifications without authorization from team leadership." Mitchell's compliance was grudging, and Sarah could see his frustration with being relegated to a follower role. But what concerned her more was his apparent inability to recognize that the experienced operators were deliberately taking a cautious approach based on their understanding of how similar situations played out in real combat. As the scenario continued, the wisdom of the methodical approach became apparent. What initially appeared to be a straightforward hostage situation revealed itself to be a complex setup designed to test the team's ability to avoid tactical traps. The aggressive approach Mitchell had advocated would have walked directly into a simulated ambush that could have resulted in mission failure and simulated casualties. Johnson's careful reconnaissance revealed the true layout of hostile forces and allowed the team to execute a precise operation that neutralized threats while protecting civilians. The success came from patience, experience, and the kind of tactical wisdom that could only be gained through years of actual combat operations. As the exercise concluded, Sarah had everything she needed to complete Mitchell's evaluation. His technical skills were adequate, but his attitude, judgment, and inability to learn from experienced mentors made him unsuitable for the demands of SEAL operations. During the post-exercise debriefing, Sarah addressed each candidate individually. When she reached Mitchell, she was direct but professional in her assessment. "Candidate Mitchell, your technical skills meet the standards for special operations training. However, your performance over the past 3 days has shown consistent issues with leadership judgment, response to feedback, and integration with experienced team members. These factors indicate that you are not ready for advancement to the next phase of SEAL training." Mitchell's response was predictable. Instead of accepting the evaluation and asking for guidance on improvement, he immediately began arguing about the fairness of the assessment process and questioning whether the scenarios had accurately reflected real-world conditions. Sarah listened patiently to his objections, then provided her final assessment. "Your response to this evaluation is exactly why you're not ready for SEAL operations. Special operations personnel must be able to accept feedback, learn from failure, and adapt their approach based on new information. Your focus on defending your decisions rather than improving your performance shows that you're not prepared for the responsibility that comes with this designation." As the formal evaluation concluded, Sarah reflected on the broader lessons of the assessment. The candidates who had shown humility, adaptability, and genuine respect for the experience of their evaluators and teammates were the ones who would advance to continue their SEAL training. Those who had been more concerned with proving their existing capabilities rather than demonstrating their potential for growth would return to their previous assignments with recommendations for additional training and development. Williams, Rodriguez, Chen, and several others had shown the combination of technical competence and mental flexibility that special operations demanded. They would continue in the program with strong recommendations from the evaluation team. Mitchell's story served as a reminder that individual talent, while necessary, was never sufficient for the unique demands of SEAL operations. The ability to work seamlessly with others, to learn from failure, and to place mission success above personal recognition were qualities that could not be taught to those who were unwilling to embrace them. As Sarah completed her final evaluation reports, she took satisfaction in knowing that the right candidates would advance, while those who needed additional development would receive the feedback necessary to improve their performance. The evaluation process had worked exactly as designed, ensuring that only personnel with the complete package of skills, attitude, and judgment would earn the privilege of wearing the SEAL designation. The candidates departed the facility with their futures determined not just by their individual capabilities, but by their demonstrated ability to embody the values and mindset that made SEAL operations successful. For Sarah, it was another successful evaluation that would help maintain the standards that kept the special operations community effective and elite.